And why do you need it? And specifically, why does your business need it? And why haven't you thought of this before? Perhaps you are struggling to find out which markets to go after. Why is your staff not listening to you? Why are they leaving? Why do you have churn? And why does everyone else seem to be doing it right? Well, we've got Ian, I have to pronounce the name again, Ian Shamandi with us today, who for the last 20 years has worked with hundreds of clients trying to define and understand their purpose. He has a process called blueprinting, which defines an organization's purpose in 7 words or less. And that's quite an interesting concept, because surely a purpose could be a whole essay. You should be a Ulysses S. Grant author to find out your purpose. But Ian does it in 7 words, and he helps organizations filter down the essence of what they're about into these 7 words. So Ian, welcome.
Thank you very much, Nicholas.
So let's talk about it. 7 words. Now, 7 obviously has quite a few meanings. There are biblical meetings. There's 7 days of the week. There's 7 things. Why? How can one reduce a purpose down to 7 words?
Because we did not start off with this methodology 20 years ago. We were just sort of consultants. And the more we did work with clients, the more we started repeating things. We discovered a little thing that we should discuss, and then we would do that with every client. And it slowly, over the course of about 5 or 7 years, it morphed into a complete methodology. And oh, geez, I forgot the question. I started out with the answer. Where am I going?
I was talking about the number 7.
Number 7, right.
Why are we using number 7?
And somebody pointed out to us, what happened was, in that methodology, it sort of started to revolve around this intriguing statement that we would boil the company down to. And someone said to us, that's really the heart of it. And they're always short. And we looked at the longest one, and it was 7 words. So we just came up with the, with the standard that your purpose needs to be defined in 7 words or less. And why? Because it can. Like, that's the glib answer, right? Is like, why would you spend paragraphs or pages describing your purpose when it can be done in 7 words or less? Something that's easy to understand, that's easy to remember, and that's easy to repeat. We call it the 3 easies. You can't do that with a paragraph or a few pages. But when you take the time and apply the rigor to boil your purpose down to 7 words or less, it's actually usually 2 or 3 or 4 words, right? So the purpose statement for Blueprint is transforming confusion into clarity. That's what my process does. I don't need anything more than that.
Yeah, and I guess each of the words that you're going to be using, though, as well, are sort of dripping with insight as well. So the words that you use are going to be important. But before we go down this road, maybe we should explain to people what purpose is, and why does a business need purpose? It's just a business. It's a money-making machine. Why do I need to have a purpose?
Yeah. So that is like the key question. And the thing is, in your intro, you talked about, do companies think about purpose? I think most companies, in one form or another, think about purpose, and none of them do anything about it because they don't know what the heck it is. And then, if you don't know what the heck it is, you don't know how to find it. Right? I can't say to you, hey, Nicholas, go out and find that thing. And you say, Ian, what thing? And I say, don't worry about those kind of details. But here's the thing. You'll know when you find it. So, and that's just like a fool's errand, right? So the definitions of purpose that are out there basically fall into 2 buckets. Why we exist. And the problem with that is, how do you answer that question? There's no way to answer it, and anything could be an answer. You have no parameters on what that answer is. So you could make some audacious claim about what your purpose is with absolutely no capability to fulfill that claim. So you need to have parameters on it. And then the other kind of other kind of definition is all of the academic ones. And oh my God, I've read so many of those, and they just make your eyes glaze over. So if you can understand them and then you can go out and figure out your purpose, all the more power to you. So Pablo Picasso, the painter, said, "The meaning of life is to find your gift, and your purpose is to share it with the world." So all he's really saying is figure out who the best possible you is, and then share all that wonderfulness with the world. And that is true of individuals, and it's true of businesses, right? What's the single most important strategic asset of a business? When I get asked that question, most companies will answer are people. Problem is, people come and go. You know, the people who are here now are not the same people who were here 10 years ago in most businesses. So people come and go. That's not the answer to what's your most important strategic asset. The answer is knowing the one thing at your root that makes you uniquely remarkable, right? What is that one distinguishing thing at your essence that makes you uniquely remarkable? Most companies do not know the answer to that question, but that's the root to their value. That is their single most important strategic asset. Figuring out the best version of them that exists and then sharing that with the world. So that's what Picasso said. I had been doing this for 17 years, starting out my process of blueprinting by defining what makes you uniquely remarkable in 7 words or less. And then I saw this Picasso quote and I said, that's your gift. So I just changed his quote to, your purpose is to discover at your essence what makes you uniquely remarkable, your gift, and share it with the world. And so that's what I do with businesses. Figure out who they are at their root, express it in 7 words or less, and then my model is to have it guide everything you do, all of your operations, and everything you say, all of your communications. Those are all the activities of the company.
What is the difference between a company that has purpose and a company that doesn't have purpose? Can you maybe give a couple of examples of who's done it well and how it's changed how the business runs and its success?
So I got to say, we didn't plan these questions in advance, but they are bang on, because basically the question you're asking is, oh, purpose is all fine and dandy. Knowing what makes you uniquely remarkable is all fine and dandy. But how does that help grow the business? If you don't know the answer to that, then purpose is meaningless, right? So here's the thing. I'll give you an example of a business, and then I'll give you an example of how they use it to grow their business. So I had breakfast with this CEO of a retail shelving company one day, right? Home Depot builds a box. They go in, they install all the rack shelving, and when they're done, the store opens. So, John's talking to me and he says, I know there's a magic to my business, but every time I open my mouth to talk about it, it sounds so generic, so banal, so like anything any of my competitors could say. And I said to him, John, it's because you don't know what business you're really in. It's a bit of an arrogant thing to say to a prospect. But to his credit, he said, you're right, I don't know what business I'm really in. Now, he knew he played in the sandbox of retail shelving companies, but he didn't know what part of that sandbox he played in uniquely by himself. So he decided to do a blueprint. Now, the way we do a blueprint, it's the CEO and up to 3 key decision makers in the company are the draft team. We create the draft and then we start socializing it out and getting other input. So where the conversation got interesting in this company's blueprint was when they started talking about how they had been in business for 3 generations, right? Not 3 decades, but 3 generations. And because of that longevity, they had developed techniques and processes and systems and procedures that allowed them to get finished significantly faster. And so you can imagine if they get a Home Depot done a month faster than their competitors, that means the store opens a month sooner. And that's 4 weeks of revenue that Home Depot did not anticipate. That's a total bonus to Home Depot. And it's caused by the retail shelving company. So as we're having this conversation about getting finished faster, one of his VPs says, he just says this as a joke. He says, you know, on our signs where it says opening soon, I want ours to say opening sooner. And I just said, that's brilliant. That's absolutely brilliant. That became their purpose statement. What is it at their essence that made them uniquely remarkable? Well, they already were working towards, were dedicated to opening sooner. They knew that subconsciously, but they didn't know it consciously, so they couldn't do it intentionally. We brought the idea of getting finished faster to the surface in the blueprint process. And then we articulated it in a clear, concise, and compelling way by just saying opening sooner. And when I say we, it wasn't my partner and I, right? They came up with the line. We never know who's going to come up with a purpose statement and a blueprint. Okay, so this is a bit of a long answer, but that's half the answer, right? Okay, so now you know how you get a purpose statement, and how this company now uses it is they use it as a decision-making tool. Normally when you're in business, you make decisions based on your experience, based on your intelligence, and you do your best. Because really when you make a decision, you're kind of predicting the future and you hope it works out. But there are no parameters on your decisions. But when you're a company that is committed to, whose purpose is opening sooner, all the decisions the company makes need to be aligned with opening sooner. So as you face a series of options, this marketing plan versus that marketing plan, this market segment versus that market segment, this whatever versus that whatever, your question does not become, what is my best option here? There's no parameters on the answer. Your question becomes, which of these options is most aligned with the company purpose of opening sooner? So here's an example of 2 things, and I'll bring this in for a landing. Sorry, it's a long answer. But when John presented the blueprint to his head office staff, and it was a 10-minute presentation. How long does it take to explain opening sooner, right? So when he was done, a carpenter, a 22-year-old carpenter at the back of the room, puts up his hand and he says, hey, if we're going to be about this opening sooner thing, then we should have a spot on our weekly time cards where every week, every one of us is required to write in a suggestion for how we're going to get finished faster. And it was like, okay, this guy just spent 10 minutes having a big strategic concept explained to him. His response was not, oh, what does this have to do with me? I'm a carpenter. Oh, or, will I get paid extra for doing this opening sooner stuff? No. His first inclination on hearing that story was building on it. And the receptionist, she wasn't really a receptionist. She was like the COO. But she said, oh, all RFPs flowed through her. And they were all submitted on the last minute of the last day, because that's how RFPs were always submitted. And she said, from now on, I'm going to count back 3 days from the client's deadline. And that's going to be our deadline to submit an RFP. Because I want even something as mundane as the submission of an RFP to send a signal that we're about getting finished faster, that we're about opening sooner. So everything, all the activities of the company, all of the products and services that it provides, all the branding and marketing and communication flows from two words: opening sooner. So that's how purpose becomes a practical, tangible, strategic asset for the company, because you are now making all decisions within the context of the one thing that makes you uniquely remarkable. Everything has to be aligned with that. And when you do, that means that all of the activities of the organization are a reflection of the one thing that makes you uniquely remarkable. All right.
So Ian, you're stealing brand agency's lunch here. So I like it, because
I'm not, Nicholas. Actually,
No.
I'm not. No.
Because purpose is such an important thing in brand, and it's something that perhaps isn't given as much love as it should be.
Totally right. But here's the thing. So I read a book I actually took a course on a book in university. It was a philosophy book. And the author was a computer science prof at Northwestern University, which I think is somewhere in Michigan or Illinois or something like that in the US. I'm in Toronto. Yeah, somewhere cold. I'm in Toronto, Canada, and we're not actually far from there, but we're not as cold as them. Anyway, so in the book was called Gödel, Escher, and Bach. Gödel was a mathematician who rocked the world with his theorem. Escher is, the guy who does the optical illusion artwork that we all had hanging in our university dorms. And Bach is the guy, he wrote a few pop tunes and was quite successful at it. And he described these as three shadows cast from the same stone. And the book attempts to describe the stone. I'm stealing that metaphor. Your purpose is your business's stone. It is the rock at the center of your business. And everything that you do and say becomes a shadow cast from that stone. So everything that you do and say all relates. One of the shadows cast from that stone is your brand. So the stone is not your brand, but your branders use the stone as guidance to create the brand. And then your marketers use the stone, opening sooner, to create the marketing. And your salespeople use opening sooner, use your purpose to define how you do sales and to define the messages that you send out in sales.
Yeah.
And I can give you an example of that if you'd like. It was a stunning sales victory for John not long after we finished the blueprint.
Go ahead.
All right. So one of the things, one of the things that they all did right away is they changed their LinkedIn profiles to reflect the opening sooner story. And not long after that, he got a message through LinkedIn from a mid-level marketing manager at Best Buy, which is a big North American electronics chain, and bricks and mortar one. And Best Buy, this mid-level construction manager at Best Buy sent him a message and said, "I'm intrigued by this opening sooner thing that you're talking about. Can you come out here and talk to us about it?" And when you get a contact from a mid-level person like that, you know that you're likely going to talk to them and then hopefully their boss as well. And then, if you impress them, they recommend you up the line, and you finally get to the decision maker, right? So John flies out to Vancouver from Toronto and walks into Best Buy's office, and he's not meeting with her or her boss. He gets ushered into the executive boardroom, and the CEO and the entire senior leadership team is in there to hear him talk about opening sooner. So he just stands in front of them and he talks for about 15 minutes about opening sooner. Again, it's so easy to do. And, there's a Q&A. And at the end of the Q&A, he hears those words that, we all know what they mean. "We'll get back to you." And that means one of two things, right? Either you'll never hear from us again, or we'll get back to you when we get our acting gear. Well, apparently they got their acting gear by later that night. And John's sitting in the departure lounge at the Vancouver airport, ready to take the red eye back to Toronto. And he gets a call from Best Buy. And they said, "We loved what you said. We have an $800,000 contract for you to do a store renovation. And if that goes well, there's more." 15 years later, they still got Best Buy as a client. But it started because somebody saw the words, somebody who is in construction, so they've got the right mindset to receive the message. They're a qualified receiver of the message. And those two words just went into her head, and she knew what they meant. She didn't need to have them explained. She just needed more detail. How do you do it? But she knew. You're not only promising to beat my deadline, but you're going to beat it by so much that I can open the store sooner and generate sales faster. She knew what that meant. And that's why she wanted to talk to him. And that was communicated with two words.
Well, that clarity that you mentioned is extremely important. As you said, you don't have to have a book to explain what the purpose meant. It's out there, and it's been thought through and very clear to all parties involved. And I love that phrase you spoke about, making the subconscious conscious. And I think that's a very important theme people need to think about. Now, one of the challenges, and I mentioned to you eating brand agencies' lunches with this, is because where does your process fit within the overall business strategy? Do you work best with companies that are already have already existed for a period of time? Or is this for somebody who's starting out a business and hasn't figured out their purpose yet? And the reason I say this is one of the challenges I've always had with running a brand agency is we often get brought in after they've decided everything, and we're just there to put some nice cover over the business decisions that they've made. Two questions here. When is the best time to do this purpose process of yours, and your experience of well, one question: when is the best time to do this purpose process?
So you're talking about two different scenarios. You're talking about an existing and probably mature business, and then as opposed to a startup. So I'll talk about the mature business first. The mature business has been operating for its entire existence according to its purpose. But because it's subconscious, it's a little hit and miss, right? They're not functioning with any intentionality. And by the way, here's an example. So IBM, after the Second World War, what were they doing? They were selling the most advanced business technology to the biggest companies in the world. And here we are 80 years later. What's IBM doing? They're selling the most advanced business technology to the biggest companies in the world. Now, what that advanced business technology is light and day from what it was 80 years ago, but they've stayed on the straight and narrow path, and they don't know their purpose. But it exists inside the culture, so in a sort of hit and miss kind of way, it keeps it on path. When you can surface it, so for an existing company, even though you may be very successful, and that, by the way, most companies who hire me to do a blueprint are doing just fine, thank you very much. But they want more. They're greedy, and I like that. And so for those companies, what it does is it takes all this stuff and it beautifully consolidates it into a nice, neat little package of opening sooner, right? So John's company existed for, as I said, 3 generations. Now, if you're a startup, I'm going to say something very controversial, which is every company started for the same reason. Virtually every company in the world started for the same reason.
Because you hate your boss.
What's that?
Because you hate your boss.
You may love your boss and still leave to start your own company. And you may even do that with your boss's blessing. But a company is started because a person or a group of people say, I know a better way to do this, right? So you've been working in the business for years. In the beginning, you just accept everything. And then you start to question and you say, that's good. That's not good. I wouldn't do it like that. I do like doing it like that. And you get to the point where you say, I need to do it. Or we need to do it on our own. We've got a different vision. But they don't articulate it. It's a fuzzy notion up in their head. And then they start the business and it takes longer to get going. And they don't know what the proper messaging is. And they don't know how to sell. They go through this long period of trial and error until they work all this stuff out. As opposed to right at the beginning, you figure out what's the one thing that makes you uniquely remarkable. The idea in your head. And then you use that to design how you're going to operate and design how you're going to communicate. So it works equally well with both, but for different reasons.
Yeah, I think if startups can figure out their purpose earlier on, as you mentioned, it can create tremendous value. It helps you figure out who you should hire, who the right clients are going to be, what suppliers you're going to tie in with. So it really does help filter out, because when you're a startup, the whole world's your oyster, and that's the problem. There's too much. So with purpose, it really can give you that blueprint, as you mentioned, in terms of what to avoid versus what to do necessarily. So
can I also talk? I mean, you talked about eating a brand agency's lunch, and in fact, so a lot of times the client asks me to go into the agency and brief them on the blueprint, and they come in with their noses out of joint because they figure that they do what I do, and the thing is that they don't, because they can't bill for it. They can't charge. So all they can do is a very rudimentary version of what I do. It's short and it's sweet, and it sort of puts lipstick on a pig. And I understand why they do it, because they have no clarity from the client about what its core value is. So I go in and I present to the agency. They got their noses at a joint. And then at the end of the presentation, they say, you know what? For the first time, I know what to say about this client. And so I haven't been very successful in this, but I have tried to create strategic partnerships with brand agencies to say, look, if you do a blueprint first and you're in the blueprint, you should be, right? This is how you, as the CEO of a brand agency, get involved at the point that you want and should get involved, which is right at the very beginning. You sit in on the blueprint, so you're listening to and contributing to the creation of it. But here's the thing. When you pick up a new client, they will either give you a little project, see how you do, and then they'll give you more and more depending on how you prove it, or you get the whole enchilada right at the beginning. But it's a big thing to try and figure out. When you sit in on the blueprint, one of the colloquial ways I describe the blueprinting process is we tear your business apart. It's sitting in pieces on the table. At some point in that discussion, your purpose statement pops out. We have a way of bulletproofing it to make sure it's right. And once we do, then we start putting the business back together with the pieces that are aligned with the purpose statement. But when that company is sitting in pieces on the table, you don't have to wonder where the opportunities for you are as a brand agency. You're just sort of sitting there with your notepad saying, oh, we can help them there, and we can help them with that, and we can help them with that. And those are all things that you wouldn't have learned about for months or years in the normal process as the client slowly lets you in and opens their kimono. You find it out all at the very beginning. You make that list of opportunities for you. And then you just figure out when the best time is to capitalize on those. You keep those in your back pocket. It might be immediately, it might be down the road, but you know what they are. You know where your growth opportunities are right from the very beginning with this client.
So Ian, we've got two nice opportunities there. We've got folks who need to clarify their purpose statements through your blueprint process, and we've got opportunities for brand agencies. So any brand agency folks out there, get in touch with Ian as well. Talking about getting in touch, Ian, where can folks get in touch with you?
Okay, so through my website, and that is the number 7words.biz. 7words.biz is where you go. And you know, where I would suggest, of course, you know, on my homepage, I've got all the usual messaging about what a blueprint is and the value of it and that sort of thing. But I'll tell you where I think the real value is on my website is in the blog. I've got, I don't know, about 30 videos. They're 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes at the most. But they're on different aspects of the tangible impact, tangible, not woo-woo, impact that blueprint, that purpose can have on growing your business. So there's even a video there on how your purpose will accelerate a merger, right? So if you're an M&A company, you want to be able to offer a blueprint as the service to the companies that you're bringing together, because you're bringing together two families that didn't know each other, or maybe they did know each other and hated each other because they were competitors. And how do you get them integrated and working towards a common goal? We did that with a hospital that had a research facility that was branded separately. So nobody knew that they were related. And the CEO of the hospital, who was in charge of both, said, how do we bring these together under one roof? And I said to him, well, if you try to make yourself be the research facility, you'll alienate all the donors and employees at the hospital. And if you try to make yourself the hospital, you'll alienate all the donors and employees at the research facility. So you don't make yourself this and you don't make yourself this. You make yourself this. And both of these things say, oh, that's what I would love to be. And that's what brings them together. So even for a merger, Blueprint accelerates that process. And acceleration means money. It means saved money from the dragging out of the merger. And it means making more money because that merger starts paying out sooner. So, I mean, when I got into this, I wouldn't have thought that purpose would play any value in a merger process. But yeah, it accelerates it. And that's hugely beneficial.
So a plethora of information on your website and the blog. So Ian, thank you. That's been fantastic. I think all of us should think a little bit about our purpose and how it can impact on our business and help us open sooner as well. So thanks, Ian.
Thank you, Nicholas. And if I can just remind you that Blueprint's purpose statement is transforming confusion into clarity. And if you're wondering if your organization needs a blueprint, just ask yourself, do we lack clarity anywhere important? If the answer is yes, give me a call.
Yeah, your line should be buzzing. Thanks, Ian.
Thank you, Nicholas.
All right.
That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. Yeah, I try not to just go